So you and I have talked about the differences between I-Chuan and Western boxing quite a lot in the past. And one of the iconic punch in Western boxing is the right cross. So what's the similarities and differences?
Good question. So yes, so for point of clarity, within the hand system of I-Chuan, there is no boxing influence. There's clearly a very heavy influence of Xingyi, being the mother art of I-Chuan. But at the time this art developed, or the family system that we practice, there had been no boxing techniques added into it. Now, having a background in both myself, I can see the merits in them both, but they're very, very different. And obviously, from my perspective, I don't combine them. I do practice them both, but separately. But the commonalities that they share, which should be for any strike, ignoring silly arguments of internal and external, but every strike you make must have momentum to it, and it must also have transfer of body weight. Because if you can't transfer body weight into the strike, there's no power whatsoever. And if there's no momentum, then there's no speed, there's no velocity, and there's no power, there's no output at the same time. So if you're thinking about, a nice, very soft, gentle move like this with my weight back and no momentum, and how that's going to look on the pad, nothing. It's going to be empty. So we must have that. If we talk about boxing first of all, very briefly, to summarize, I see two main, lots of other variations, but two main ways to throw a right cross. The first way is what's commonly taught to beginners or in amateur boxing, which is good practice, good dynamics to learn a right cross, which is using the front hip as a fulcrum. The power of boxing is very much like cracking a whip. So a lot of it comes on the retraction. So as I throw the right hand up and I keep my guard tight, I rotate on the ball of the foot, getting close to full extension here, using this as a fulcrum, and then come back. So the feeling is cracking a whip and then quickly pulling back. So that looks like, if I want to add more power to that, I can step again, bringing my body weight into it, to there. The faster I bring it out and pull back, the more power I can get into it. Okay, so that's one way. The other slightly more refined way, which is more unusual to see taught these days, is what I'd call a chopping right hand. Not an overhead. So you would see this practiced and executed by famous boxers like Thomas Hearns, Lennox Lewis, more recently Tyson Fury's been adopting this. The thing that those three share is they've all been through the Kronk gym. So this punch was a bit of a speciality of Emmanuel Stewart, who was the head trainer there. Sadly passed away. His nephew is now keeping his teachings alive. So the difference with that punch, it's got a wider arc, a slightly different trajectory, and the hand turns over, hence why it's called chopping. So from here, I begin the same way, using the anchor point for the front hip, pulling towards the target. You can see the fist turns, chops down, and comes back. So this kind of downward movement, it's a very powerful knockout punch because the punch is coming back in a different way to how a traditional right cross comes back on the same path. The path is different, so the power is almost circular with it, and you get this forward and downward power with it. So it looks like okay. So that's the other variation of the right cross. Now the I-Chuan punch, we wanted to go over that. That is, well, the thing about I-Chuan is, in some ways you could say there is no punches. It's just 6 directions of force and body mechanics and storing of energy, release of energy. But if we look at putting those components together into some of the directions, into how you use the body, it's quite different. So it may look a little bit like the chopping punch or the chopping right hand. For a start, in terms of my lower body, I'm not rotating on the ball of the foot. I can do a rotation, but it's with my 6 harmonies. So my hand, my foot, my elbow, my knee, my shoulder and my waist here, and I use the anchor point as my center line, sitting into my quad here. I can turn to here. Okay? So that's one. The other one is what I call the supporting hand. So in this case, the left hand is holding, similar to Jam Jong. So you've got the holding position of feeling a supporting, holding a ball here. What that does is open up my bare shoulders, so I get round the back of power. With the punching on, so with the first way of throwing the right cross, there's a lot of elbow extension to it. With the second way, with the chopping one, there's less, but there's still some. With our way, the punch is coming from the scapula, it's coming from the back of the body, so there's none or very little elbow extension. So it comes round on an arc like this. Okay, coming back on a different path as well. Now, the intent, because with each one, it's mind boxing. I'm not thinking about hitting the pad. I'm not thinking about going through the pad. I've got disassociation from the punch in many ways, but if I want to focus on anywhere, I focus on this hand. The more power I put into holding, storing, feeling an intent here, a circular pathway here, and then a rotation or turning of my elbow, hand, knee, shoulder and waist together, and that then looks like again, ignore the pad, ignore him, thinking about holding here. That's the difference.
Nice one. Thank you very much.